Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast as we begin conference play across all the fall sports here. You can feel the air kind of drying out. The sky's a little bluer. Fall is starting to creep our way. We're getting more hurricanes out in the Atlantic. It's getting crazy out here. It's getting late in the year. Jeff Jaron, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy joining you here. Gentlemen, any truth to the rumor that Danny White called you to schedule you for a home and home, or no?
It's not a good joke, Jeff.
No, it's a terrible joke. Let's just leave that one out.
No, why don't we just talk about the historical impact of this show? This is the first ever in the history of the Black and Gold Banneret. I don't know, Jeff, how many years Black and Gold Banneret Podcast has been on?
We started in 2016. 2016.
This is the very first show that Brian Murphy has been a part of after a UCF football regular season loss.
That's true. That's very true.
I think too much has been made of this. I think really way too much has been made of this.
Well, that's not going to stop us from blaming you for it. We are blackandgoldbanneret.com, SB Nation's home for UCF sports. You can follow us on Twitter at UCF_Banneret. Follow us individually at Jeff_Sharon, Eric Lopez Elo, Spokes_Murphy. Follow us at Facebook.com/blackandgoldbanneret. We got lots to talk about here. Some scheduling news for football, which we'll break down for you. We'll also put a bow on UCF's first regular season loss since the end of the 2016 season. 35-34 against Pitt, which we broke down post-game on our new post-game video webcast called Night Shift. Make sure you check that out if you haven't yet. We'll also look ahead to the UConn game. We have a special guest, Aman Kidwai from the UConn blog, one of our SB Nation brethren, joins us to talk about UConn football post the announcement that they're leaving the American and going Indian football and taking everything else to the Big East. So lots to talk about there. But let's dive in actually with the big news that broke earlier today. We'll start on a positive note, everybody. That's just for you. UCF has announced additions to their football schedule. So a couple notes on this. They actually kind of repackaged some earlier announcements, to be honest with you. But here's what you need to know. UCF is adding a home and home with Boise State, home in 2021, on the blue turf in Boise in 2023. They are adding a home and home with BYU, home in 2023. By the way, UCF and BYU have played home and homes before. And in Provo in 2024, and then also the 2024 game against North Carolina has been moved to that's the road game at North Carolina, has been moved to 2027. So it's North Carolina in Orlando in 2020 and 2025, in Chapel Hill in 2027. So Murph, we'll start with you. Obviously, this has been getting quite a bit of positive news, actually, both from the national press and a lot of excitement among the fans from what I've been seeing. This just seems to be a match made in heaven. UCF and Boise State, two of the darlings of the non-autonomous 5 conferences, right?
Yeah, I mean, the narrative of, Boise State blazed the trail that UCF is now trotting, basically. The lower conference underdog that upsets the apple cart. Really, and so to see them face off is going to be really attractive, I think, for viewers of, for just people who like college football, because that story, it should still be present in 2 years. So I think that matchup jumped off the page, and I would be remiss if I didn't say that I'm looking forward to seeing some blue turf in 4 years.
It's going to be interesting. By the way, the first game in 2021, it's the day and time are listed as to be determined week 1, which tells me that UCF might be holding out to maybe have that on a weeknight to start the season in 2021, which I think would be very interesting. Yep. How about you, Lopez?
Jeff's a winner. Jeffrey's a winner. Yes, I agree with that. By the way, in fact, that's the same thing for the North Carolina game next year, if you notice.
Yeah, 2020. Yeah, that's also TBD week 1.
If I had to bet money, I would not be surprised if both of those games are either in those respective years are on Thursday night or Friday night, especially the Carolina one with Mac Brown back at North Carolina. I could see, they kind of like what ESPN used to do with Steve Spurrier at South Carolina, where it seemed like he was on every Thursday night to start the season every year at South Carolina. I could see something similar to that with North Carolina and Mac Brown. So it wouldn't surprise me if that Carolina game's on Thursday or Friday. And Boise State plays a ton of weeknight games as is. That's part of the package they get with ESPN. So it would not surprise me at all if the Boise State UCF game's also a Thursday or a Friday night game in particular, where you're the only game in town that night. So and maybe even Monday night, depending on what else is options at 2021. So I think that's a natural. Brian brought up all the reasons why it's appealing, but I think it's appealing for the fan bases, right? Because I kind of feel there's a little animosity here, right? Because I think UCF fans resent the fact that Boise State kind of gets held to a different pedestal than UCF, at least in UCF's eyes, where like people are like, man, you should schedule like Boise, and you look at Boise, what they've done, and UCF's like, well, we're just as good, if not better, and we've scheduled just as well. So I feel there's a little animosity from that standpoint from both sides of that, and I think Boise's like, you guys do all this talking, we've been there, done that. So I think it creates some interesting chemistry there that I think could be exciting. Both programs have been very successful, and I think it's different, and it'll be fun. So I think that's the headliner, which is funny to say that considering there's 2 teams from the ACC on the schedule.
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. I just hope that these 2 programs maintain the level of success that they've had, through this year, through next year. I mean, there's no reason to think that they won't, but you never know. Especially when you get out to 2023. Isn't that always the challenge, right, Murph?
Yeah, that is the main story out of all of this. Like, yes, these matchups are outstanding. Certainly the Boise State's very appealing on paper, and really, most of these are. But your only hope is that once these games are played, when you get to this date, that both these teams are good. And it just so happens that UCF hasn't had good luck in that department with their P5 scheduling. They scheduled Stanford, right in 2014. They were coming off a huge season, and now Stanford doesn't look like a great win this year. They scheduled Louisville, who was a 8-9 win team. Now they've completely bottomed out. And this goes with Georgia Tech and North Carolina as well. They scheduled them at better points in those programs' histories. I believe they scheduled North Carolina right when they were coming off the Orange Bowl, I believe. And now it's like, well, they're not that great. So your only hope when you schedule these things is that these teams will be good. And unfortunately, people lose sight outside of Orlando. You lose sight that no one can control that, really.
Yeah, it's a lot like buying a stock, right? You're buying lows, hoping that you buying high so that you can at least hold or sell high, right? And you don't want to take a loss on this one. Go ahead, Eric. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say the one thing that minimizes some of that is, for example, the Boise State game in 2021. That's the first game of the year. So, and that's going to give you a good TV time slot regardless. Regardless of how either team does the rest of the way, that's going to get you good exposure that first weekend. So I think that kind of helps, eliminate some of that. The thing that hurt Stanford's situation that Brian brought up is that we saw Stanford a couple games and we're like, oh, they're not really that good in some of these cases. So sometimes that hurts you when it's during the year. The fact that it's the first game of the year is going to excite a lot of people and it'll bring a lot of interest. And we'll see. And Boise, by the way, has been very good for about 20 years. So I mean, if you're going to find somebody that's pretty consistent, that's a good bet right there. And maybe BYU's on the way up. They're having an interesting year. They've beaten Tennessee and they've beaten USC. So you wonder if they're turning things around. And then you got Louisville, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, all with new coaches. So how's Mac Brown going to do in North Carolina? How is Jeff Collins, who we know very well, going to do at Georgia Tech? And then how's Satterfield going to do at Louisville? It remains to be seen.
So let's look at this from the UCF perspective, and I want to take a look at the future non-conference opponent schedule. So right now for 2020, UCF is home for North Carolina, at Georgia Tech, TBA against FIU. There's still one slot open. I'm under the assumption that they're going to try and get an FCS opponent in there. There's still a slot for an FBS opponent in 2021. Only 2 non-conference games are scheduled. That's Boise and then at Louisville 2 weeks later. 2022, you've got Louisville and Georgia Tech coming here back-to-back weeks. That's going to be something in 2022. And then, of course, at FIU.
Actually, I've got it 2 weeks apart. It's September 10th for Louisville and the 24th for Georgia Tech. So
okay, yeah, that's right. You're right. Okay.
Could be a buy in there.
Yeah, there could be a buy in there. And then the FIU game is at FIU September the 1st, which I'll have to double check what day of the week that is, but I think it might be a Thursday.
That's like a weeknight. Yeah, no, I read that
because there's 10 days between that and Louisville. So, 23 you have 2 openings, and this is assuming UCF, one of those openings is going to go to an FCS team at Boise, and then the BYU game at home is set for Veterans Day, November the 11th. So it's a late season game, which leads me to believe that what UCF did last year with UConn opening the season, they're going to open the season possibly with a conference game in 2023. There's still 3 slots available in 2024 and 2025 and 2027. My question is, you haven't seen any. You have 3 games scheduled in 20, 3 games scheduled in 22. Are they kind of holding the door open to see what the American does with UConn leaving and the divisions going away? Like, could there be a possibility that the American goes to 9 conference games?
Don't you answer your own question on that? I believe you have your own answer on that.
I mean, I don't know. Now Carnet Evans.
Oh, I thought you've been in the camp of that they will.
No, I'm not 100% sure. I think they are they're definitely scrapping divisions, but I don't know if they're going to go to 9 conference games. Carnet Evans tweeted me back. He said, has to be 8, mathematically impossible to have 9 conference games with an 11-team conference. I don't know if that's entirely true. I haven't busted out the TI-83 yet, but first of all, is it mathematically impossible? And second of all, now I know that there are leagues that have 9 conference games. There's it wouldn't be right. The Pac-12 does that. I think the Big Ten does it too, right? No, the Big 12. I'm sorry. So. But you can do that with an 11-team conference, and then just have one team that you just don't play every year. I mean, it's
here's the thing. Let me just say this, because Danny White appeared. He did obviously open mic with Mike Bianchi. He's also was on with Scott Inez locally on ESPN 580, and I believe, and I'm going to paraphrase this because I think somebody even mentioned it to me as well, and I thought I heard the same thing. I think Danny White mentioned that they were booked, they were complete from now to 2023. I believe that's what it would say. So if that's the case, then they probably already have, 2020. And I was talking to Murph about this off air. They might have a home schedule with someone either at 2021 and 2023. We just don't know who that is yet.
Right.
There's speculation.
Brandon Hellwig hinted at that, by the way, after they made this announcement that there's more coming. But we've heard that for how many months now?
UCFSports.com's very own. And Hellwig, just for proper recognition for the legendary Brandon Hellwig.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's the point. Just because they announced these now doesn't mean they don't have other stuff already booked. I mean, the Boise thing's been, speculated for a while, and and it just,
BYU
you waited.
too.
Yeah, and the funny thing about the BYU one is that kind of got complete because Florida announced they were having a home-and-home with Utah, and Utah agreed to it, and Utah and BYU agreed to kind of not play during that time frame, which freed up BYU to play UCF. So it's funny how one other series can affect the other, and that's sometimes what delays some of these decisions. So I don't think it means we're going to go 9 conference games. I think they might have something already planned out. We just don't know yet what it is and who will it be from that standpoint, especially since the way the schedule kind of plays out, they're pretty flexible. They have a home and away game scheduled for 2021 and 2023, so they could go either way, I guess, how they want to do it.
Yeah.
But I don't think 9 games is necessarily the plan there. I thought you were going to bring up, is UConn a possible schedule filler?
Yeah,
they're going to need games. That's another one that's been brought up.
There was some chatter about that brought up that UConn has at least discussed the possibility of getting on UCF's schedule when they go independent. Are you guys in favor of that? Like, would that be a good move? No.
Not at all.
Yeah, no. I mean, nothing against UConn.
All right.
Well, actually, maybe it is. All right, moving on. So I guess we're just going to have to wait and see now if anything else does drop. At least the first part of it has dropped, and we're going to wait and see what the rest of it comes in. Real quick, I'll just give you guys. I'll let you guys predict. Just real quick. Let's say UCF announces one more home and home. Which conference do you think that team will be from? And Eric, will start with you.
Pac-12.
Okay.
Yep.
Brian?
Pac-12.
Interesting.
By the way, I should amend something. I should amend a previous statement. They scheduled Georgia Tech after their Orange Bowl appearance. North Carolina's never been to the Orange Bowl.
That's right. But North Carolina did have a good season, though, right? I mean, I know that.
Right. When they scheduled North Carolina, they were like 8 and 9 win teams. But Georgia Tech is the one that went to the Orange Bowl and they scheduled them that following April. And now Georgia Tech is losing to the Citadel.
Right.
So,
And, well, just like you mentioned Stanford. UCF scheduled Stanford after they've been to 3 straight BCS bowl games. So yeah.
By the way, the reason I say Pac-12, you did this in-depth piece this summer, I want to say, Jeffrey, where you broke down the whole scheduling issues with UCF and who is available to fill what spots. So you did a huge breakdown on who has spots where and things like that, and how many teams have all their commitments filled and stuff like that. And I was talking to Murph about this as a former West Coast resident. I was looking. There's a lot of Pac-12 schools that have multiple open spots in those 2 years. So that's kind of why I'm betting the odds here, and thinking to myself that they're going to try to get a second team from a major conference. Because if you look at those 2 years, 2021 they have Boise State at home. They go to Louisville. In 2023 they have Boise and BYU. And Danny White has said he would like to have at least 2 Power 5 teams a year in the schedule with possibly a G5 and then an FCS. That's kind of the model. So that would lead me to believe they would like to get a quote-unquote Power 5 added to that schedule in those 2 years. And I think the Pac-12 makes sense because I think the Pac-12 is probably the most available and more willing to do that. Time will tell if that's accurate.
I'll give you one that you might. I'll give you my thought. You want to know who you want to watch out for right now?
All right.
Florida State. Florida State has a lot of openings in the next several years. Both Florida State and Miami in the coming years. So that's something that we should keep an eye on. Them, Tennessee, if you're looking for an SEC school, that might be an interesting one. And then possibly our friends from Arkansas. Arkansas fight. What's up? Want to give them a shout out. So, all right, we're going to take a break. When we return, we'll briefly talk about the weekend that was, the Pitt loss, and then we'll also look ahead with to UConn with Aman Kidwai of the UConn blog. Stick around. We'll be right back. This is the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Brian Murphy, and Eric Lopez with you. Make sure that you follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter. We're going to continue on with the football talk now. We don't want to, give anybody PTSD or anything here, but we're going to quickly touch upon just the Pitt game and the end of one streak and possibly the beginning of another. I don't know, but I was kind of like, the regular season streak, because I felt like everyone was talking about the end of the streak with the 35-34 loss to Pitt. But I was like, well, I kind of didn't really buy that. I was like, well, actually, the streak kind of ended with the LSU game, and I don't feel so bad about this.
Just wait until UCF loses a home game. We're gonna have this all over again.
Yeah, I know, or a conference game.
Oh, now what are you doing, Karma?
I know. But 35-34 was the final. UCF Pitt really kind of had their way with UCF in terms of the trenches, aside from a 13-minute and 30-second stretch in the third quarter where UCF scored 31 points. But the Knights fell down 21-0, came back, took the 31-21 lead, led 34-28. There was a not a botched fourth down, but a missed fourth down in there where UCF could have gotten some more points, but didn't, deep in Pitt territory. And Pitt runs the Philly special with 1 minute to go on a 4th and goal inside the 5, and they get it, and UCF can't get into field goal range with their final possession. And, of course, this is obviously, well, here's the latest news, is that this is apparently enough of a cause for celebration for Pittsburgh football that they're actually releasing T-shirts about this game.
Oh, my goodness.
Which is unbelievable.
You said Philly special, Jeff. I've seen shirts that don't say that.
It's
called the Pitt special because
no. Listen,
called it a Pitt special.
I am not calling it the Pitt special because I'm an aviation fan and there's only one Pitt special out there, and it's an aerobatic biplane. I will leave it at that rather than nerd you guys out. But anyway.
Moving on. I want to address Murph. Because he's the only one who hasn't publicly spoken. He's written about the game.
Yes.
And some just thought. But he was actually there in person. Murph, a lot of people were wrong about this game, myself included. I said it on the night shift. I ate a lot of crow on Saturday.
We were all wrong about it. We were all dead wrong.
So my question to you, I'm not going to ask you, hey, what happened? Because we know what happened. But which of these things, what was the most shocking thing to you now, if you've had a few days to reflect? Because I think you felt like I did. We didn't think this would be a problem game. I did give you credit. You thought the pass rush would give UCF some problems potentially. But what surprised you that we got about the game?
I thought the offensive line play overall, both run blocking and pass blocking, they got worked. They got worked by an aggressive defensive front that put a lot of different looks toward them. They had guys coming from different angles. They had guys moving along the line. They had linebackers who were basically rushing all day, and they really didn't have a whole opportunity to either, one, stop them from pressuring or sacking Dylan Gabriel, and they couldn't get a running game going. And it's amazing to think that this offense with these running backs and that O-line can't run the ball effectively, and they just could not. I mean, even when you take out the sack yardage, he had 6 sacks. You take out the sack yardage, they still barely rushed the ball. I think it was for less than 5 yards a carry, which for this team is not good. And one of those carries early on in the game went for 36 yards from Adrian Killens. So that, to me, was the most, shocking, whatever. I don't know what adjective you want to put on it, but that was, the aspect of the game that stood out most. And I will say as well, I remember last week's podcast when we were mocking Jeff Sharon about, he said he was worried about this game, and me and Elo openly mocked him on this air, and we are wrong, but that's because sports are weird.
Well, I'll defend Jeff. I will give Jeff because we talked about the point spread and we said, hey, don't judge it based on what's going on during the week. Judge it by what's going on at the end of the week. Well, Jeff, that's kind of the problem with doing this podcast when we do it is we don't know what the final line is, but the number did go down at the end. So there was a lot of late money.
That's what I was worried about.
But we didn't know. I can't forecast that. I mean, unless you want us to be meteorologists and just forecast it and be wrong like 90% of the time.
Stop it with the weather.
There we go. Thank you.
Get out of there with that.
I have to have fun with this. You have to.
Now it's your thing.
Murph, what you mentioned unable to run the ball. The thing that surprised me, I saw a lot of the Pitt games this year, and this again maybe is another reminder that you can't judge matchups based on what's happening against other opponents because every game's different. Pitt couldn't run the ball the whole year. They averaged 2.9 yards a carry going into this game. It averaged over 6 a pop. Any explanation there? What happened there? I know the defensive line just get beat up. Did we get all caught up in the Stanford game in retrospect?
I wonder if this team, I'm not saying they explicitly overlooked Pittsburgh, but I have heard enough from guys this week that makes me think that this team did not approach this game with 100% seriousness. I just believe after a while they might have just thought that they're going to win because that's what they do. And I do want to point out at least a couple of quotes from offensive lineman Jake Brown. He's a senior. He's been here forever. But he's also very outspoken. And I talked to him today because I wanted to do a story on the offensive line. And I said, what did you see when you look back at the Pitt film? And this is what he said to me. There's 2 quotes here, and I'll tell you that kind of one follows the other. And I'll read you what he said to me. He said, kind of what you saw in the practice week. A little bit of complacency from everybody is kind of what I felt. I feel like that we were more complacent than we should have been. You should never be complacent, but you see it all over the film. To me, that's what I saw. And then he continued later saying, I think that's partially due to some of, and I take credit for this, the leadership for not really working on getting after the guys during the week and just kind of allowing them to be complacent. Same as myself. Man. And Jordan Johnson talked about how this loss can be humbling because there's a natural feeling once you win so many games that that's your destiny. And I feel like that's what kind of happened here. And that's why this team started so slow. I don't know if they really thought that Pitt was going to be this much of a threat. And if they did, they sure didn't. It seems like the players didn't feel like they were acting like it during the practice week.
Yeah. Well, I think Otis Anderson said it after the game, right? He was like, well, he didn't say exactly that, but he said we're pissed, and I thought, A, you should be, and B, it kind of got me thinking. And Elo, I'm so sorry, but because I want to get to what you said in a second, but it kind of got me thinking. Well, I hate saying it because that a loss is a good thing. I dislike saying that very much, but does this not snap guys? It's like a share game, right? Snap out of it, and snap them back to reality and say, "Hey guys, you can get beat if you're not careful." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
I think we'll learn that about early in the UConn game if it did or didn't, right? I mean, it depends on how they come out. Do they come out crisp, take it to UConn, jump on them, dominate early, or are they coming out very going through the motions, not executing? I think maybe that's where we'll learn something about the UConn game.
Like a little tentative or something like that.
Right. Let me just say this. As much as I will, we did say in our roundtable article, if people would have read our roundtable, I did bring up, and I know I was not the only one. I think you might have even brought it up too, Jeff, in the roundtable. You're 18 to 22-year-old kids. It's easy to get overconfident when you win a lot of games and look past them, right? You don't come out. Think about it. You played the same team a year ago and blew them out. You probably watched them on tape. They didn't look good. They didn't impress you, no matter what the coaches tell you, right? So, and I remember Kyle Israel, was a former quarterback, was at the game. Pittsburgh even tweeted he didn't like the vibe on the field, Murph. I don't know if you were on the field pregame or not. He felt they weren't, locked in as far as emotionally there. They were kind of passive a little bit, too cool, if you will. I don't know, about that.
Thanks for setting me up really well, Eric, because guess who also thought that? The players themselves.
There you go.
Look, again, talking to Jake Brown and Cole Schneider today, and they talked about this game, and I said, because I actually mentioned to Cole Schneider a quote from Eric Mitchell, the linebacker, because Eric Mitchell after the game said, it felt like a dream. It didn't feel like real life. And so I asked Cole, because the offensive line has been so successful, that if their performance almost didn't feel real, that they were struggling so much that it didn't feel real. And he said it was really different, honestly. Even before the game started, just putting my knee braces on, it was just a feeling. I just didn't feel the same as I usually do going out there and playing. Everything just seemed different. It wasn't like a normal game. And then Jake Brown, who is beside Cole during this interview, brought it up, and I wanted to say, he goes, and so Jake Brown then said, the game had a weird feel to it. It felt weird walking onto the field. I don't know what it was. I don't know if we were not used to that kind of atmosphere. I'm not really sure, but it felt weird going out there. I don't really know personally. I didn't really personally have the same juice as I usually do walking on the field. I don't know if that's me not being prepared myself correctly, or I don't know. It felt different.
That's interesting. I don't know.
And yet with all that.
Bad juju.
And yet with all that, they came all the way back and had a 2-score lead in the third quarter, Murph, okay? And we wouldn't be probably having these conversations if there wasn't 3 penalties for UCF on that critical drive that nobody talks about. Everybody's focused on the play calling and all that stuff. I go back to that Pitt drive, the 31-21, where there was a roughing the passer call. Yeah. There was a unsportsmanlike call, and there was a pass interference, something else like that.
There was a taunting call. There was a fake pass call and a roughing the passer call. There were 3 personal fouls in the span of 4 plays late in the third quarter of a touchdown drive,
which I think got Pitt back in the game. If they don't score in that possession, I think this game is going the other way. UCF blows them out. So to me, I think that's got to be the most frustrating thing, is even with all that, you got all the way back, you took the lead, and then you kind of had some self-inflicted wounds with those penalties in that drive that got Pitt back in the game, and then obviously the offsides call in the last drive on the 4th and 5 that gave Pitt an automatic first down to set up the game-winning touchdown. Your thoughts on that, on the lack of discipline there, because a lot of people, and Jeremy was vocal about the play calling, but I'm more, I think the penalties to me was a bigger issue than the play calling. How do you feel about those things?
I it was definitely a huge issue. I mentioned it in my post-game column. That drive in particular in the third quarter, I mean, they basically gave Pitt 39 free yards at a time in which that they had really gotten a good rhythm at stopping that offense. But for me,
it felt like UCF had their foot right on their neck and then let him back up, right?
But for me, the offsides on 4th and 5, we're talking about a play that if Brandon Wilson stays on sides and UCF gets a stop there on 4th and 5, they take over up by 6 with, I think it was like 2.5 to go. It's a totally different game at that point. I mean, UCF could literally just run the clock out if maybe with like 2 first downs. That to me sticks out more than even the 3 penalties and 4 plays during the late third quarter drive.
Yeah.
Real quick. Any issues with the 4th and 2 going for it? There's a lot of discussion about that. UCF had it up 3. They chose to go for it. McCray got stopped a yard short. I didn't think it was that big of a deal just because Pitt punted. They didn't score, and UCF eventually got the field goal. And I don't like playing if you would have kicked the field goal there and then a field goal later, that would have made the difference. Right. Some people disagree with that. Some people didn't like the call. They thought they should have run outside, not inside. How do you feel about that whole sequence?
Yeah, I agree that I did not like the call. I'm fine with the fact that they went for it. You expect this offense to pick up 2 yards on any play on its worst day. So that's fine. However, as I wrote, the play call there is sort of like the definition of insanity, because they hadn't been able to run the ball consistently through the middle of the line all game. So what would give you the impression that now is the time where it actually works? And so the fact they just ran a simple inside handoff to McCray off a right guard, I just don't understand that play call at that time. I agree really with the decision to go for it. The play call was bland as hell.
Yeah, it's a read option too, and we broke that one down on the on the night shift
Murph,
show, which you can check out.
Jeff is the new John Madden of this era. I mean, he just got a telestrator.
I got the telestrator out and everything, man. It was fabulous. I channeled my inner Madden on that one, but nonetheless,
Murph is impressed, as you can hear.
No, I love that. I love that because I and they probably need Dylan. It's not. I assume, Jeff, when you're doing your X's and O's on your telestrator, did you see if the defensive lineman for that play was crashing early, or didn't you see a time in which maybe Dylan could have kept one of these read option draws?
We talked about the 4th and 2, and on that play, the left side of Pitt's defensive line lined up over right guard and right tackle. They crashed quick, but the outside defensive end on UCF's left, Pitt's right, on the far side of the guy who's on the far side, he went wide, and not too wide, but wide enough where if Dylan kept the ball and ran off tackle, he not only would have had a first down, he probably would have scored because the two receivers on the left side were engaged with their guys downfield. As it was, he gave. It looked to me like he was pretty dead set on giving the ball to McCray the whole way. He didn't even think about running, and he's going to look at that film, and that's why I was saying earlier. You live by the freshman quarterback and you die by the freshman quarterback. And I think a more veteran guy would have seen that. I'm not saying that they should pull Dylan Gabriel. What I'm saying is you put somebody else in there and they're making a different decision.
You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes.
Yeah, he's going to make mistakes and you got to learn to live with that. But
by the way, I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of times in general where quarterbacks make the wrong read and nobody notices because the play worked anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
If there was
and
better
UCF may have gotten
blocking,
away with that a lot this season already too.
We don't know. We don't. Only they know. We don't know.
90% of sports opinions are given to us in hindsight. We all know what we're doing.
Right. So
I like that. That's pretty good.
I like that. I'm going to write that down. Nonetheless, you got to pick yourself back up, and UCF has UConn this week to start. To start the conference schedule. UCF is back at home. Ain't nothing like home cooking. With a 43.5 point number. Ooh, boy. Good luck with that, you degenerates out there. 64
started at 39, didn't it?
Started at 39, moved up. 39.5, moved up 4 points.
Does that make
UCF
you nervous there, Jeffrey? Are you nervous?
This is to stay away. I don't like these huge numbers. 66% of the money's on UCF. The over-under 64.5. 65% of it's on the over. This is the final meeting in conference between these two schools. Who knows what happens in the future? But UCF has a 4-2 lead. Last loss for UCF to UConn was in 2015. 7 p.m. kick at Spectrum Stadium on ESPN2. We're going to have Aman Kidwai here on in just a second when we have a break, but after we have a quick break. But just to really quickly set the scene for this game, we're not expecting anything untoward, are we here, Brian?
What do you mean by that? You're basically saying
I'm not thinking there's going to be much of a surprise.
Not on the scoreboard unless UCF puts up 80.
I keep going back though to what Otis Anderson said, and I know I mentioned earlier about he said we're pissed. If that's true, and we have no reason to suspect it's not, God help UConn in this game, right? I mean, are we thinking? All right, are we picking the over or the under here? Well, excuse me, not over and under. Are we picking UCF to cover or no?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
That wasn't quite what I was.
It's not live money,
right? Yeah. Right.
I mean, I'm not saying I would bet the mortgage or anything like that. But look, I said it earlier, and I mean it. I do mean this. We'll know early. If UCF's locked in, refocus, whatever you want to call it, and come out boom, 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 and it's 28-0. You're like, man, they are really. Or do they come out through the motions? Because or is there still some hangover there of a loss? How do teams respond from a loss? I think we said that on the night shift show, Jeff. It's not the loss. It's how do you react from the loss?
It's not whether you get knocked down. It's how you get back up.
Right. So I want to see how they come out. If they come out locked in, focus, and dominate like they should, or is there some kind of bumps on the road there? And I think that's what we'll learn there. And then I think the other thing, Brian, the quarterback. I mean, we know Gabriel's going to play. He's starting and all that. But who, if this game is a blowout, who's the quarterbacks that come after him? Perhaps I think that's some intrigue there too.
Could we see Darryl Mack perhaps?
Possibly, but I still think that answer has been given. That answer was given during the Stanford game. That if they do bring in the other quarterbacks, we might see him, but it's nothing like, oh, what does this mean? Like, no, they just want to get him some action. I think really my first bet as far as like who's the next guy under center for more than one snap is probably Quadri Jones again, because Quadri Jones is a mop-up guy.
Interesting. Other games in the American, Navy-Memphis, a good Thursday night matchup on ESPN at 8. Temple is home for Georgia Tech in the Jeff Collins Bowl. That's on CBS Sports Network. 3:30 on Saturday. All the rest of these games are Saturday. 4 o'clock, SMU is at USF on ESPNU. Cincinnati's at Marshall. That game can be watched on Facebook. Way to go, Marshall. ECU's at Old Dominion on ESPN Plus at 6, and then Houston's at North Texas at 8, also on Facebook. Wow, Conference USA.
By the way, the over-under for this UConn game is around 64.5.
Yeah. So
with a 43-point spread, that basically means that Vegas is predicting a 54-10 kind of game.
Okay.
Sounds about right.
Thanks, Murph.
Yeah, we'll write that one down. And then who's broadcasting the game for ESPN2? Eric, do you know?
Yes. In fact, if you read on the blackandgoldbanneret.com, if it's not out already by the time you're listening to this, it will be out. I did the numbers recap of the Pitt game, and I mentioned that Roy Philpott, Kelly Stauffer, Jeffrey, one of your favorites.
Former Seattle Seahawk.
Yeah, they'll be on the call alongside Lauren Sisler down on the sideline. That'll be a ESPN2 7 o'clock game, going head-to-head, by the way, with, among others, Ohio State and Nebraska.
That's going to be a tough one.
Head coach over there at ABC. But so anyway, that'll be the crew there for the game on ESPN2 on Saturday night.
Yeah, and then also other games on across from Mississippi State at Auburn on ESPN and Stanford at Oregon State on Pac-12 network. That's a tough slot. That's a tough slot to be in, but
especially if it's a blowout, right?
Right.
And people might click over, and
it might be interesting to see. Let's see how pissed UCF really is. Yeah. So,
sure.
So that'll be a 7 o'clock kickoff. UConn and UCF. When we get back, Aman Kidwai from the UConn blog joins us to talk about UConn football post leaving the American. And a lot more to talk about as well. Stick around. The Black and Gold Banneret Podcast is back after this. Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. And joining us now to talk about the UConn Huskies is Aman Kidwai. He comes from the UConn blog, and we've had him on the show before, so he's a repeat offender. And thanks again, Aman, for joining us here once again on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. How are things going up in Connecticut?
Things are great. Thanks. Yeah, appreciate you having me on.
No problem, man. Thanks for having. So let's talk about this game a little bit earlier. A little bit, and then we'll talk about the big picture with UConn later. But I guess what's the approach with UConn right now among UConn football fans when they're looking at this game? Is it like I think of that GIF image of Wile E. Coyote opening up an umbrella while a bunch of rocks fall on his head. Is that how UConn fans are approaching this, or what's the story?
Yeah, I mean, we actually, believe it or not, allowed ourselves to get our hopes a little high after looking mildly competent against Illinois in week 2. Not that, given everything that had gone down the previous season, the fact that the defense was making some stops and some turnovers and all that was pretty promising. And then actually Randy Edsall made a change at quarterback also that it was a true freshman, but he seemed to have a lot more upside than the grad transfer who was starting. And then they go into the Indiana game coming off of a bye week and really laid a complete egg on the road over there. Again, expectations were not to win that game or anything like, or anything like that, but obviously you didn't want to see the big loss in the way that it turned out. And so I think at this point, everyone's expecting this UCF game. Knights coming off of a tough loss, opening up conference play, and just being probably a lot like a reminder of last season, which is unfortunate because we had hoped that maybe the Huskies had matured past that stage of getting like really badly blown out all the time.
Who on UConn's team are UCF fans going to look at and say, "Wow, okay, that guy's pretty good. Let's keep an eye on him next, for maybe the NFL draft or something."
Well, the NFL draft. So, everyone on this team is a freshman and a sophomore, basically, who's playing significant minutes. But I would say, defensively, safety Tyler Coyle is someone. He had a pick six against Illinois. He's been starting for a couple of years now. He's actually a junior. He's someone who's got great size and athleticism. One of those like 6'2", 6'3" safeties, and someone who can make plays. There's a linebacker who's a Notre Dame grad transfer named DJ Morgan who has had a lot of tackles, also been really productive on like tackles for loss, forced fumbles, stuff like that. So he's been someone that Randy Edsall was able to really plug in there and be a dependable starter, obviously on a defense that needs all sorts of help. So and then on the defensive line, actually, Travis Jones, he's a sophomore, but he was pretty consistently last year as a freshman on Pro Football Focus's top defensive players, and for his age, seems to be doing a really good job. And he's probably one of the higher rated recruits that UConn has gotten. He was decommitted from Rutgers and ended up going to UConn. So those are a few guys to keep in on the defensive side. Offensively, there's Art Tompkins, who's both of the running backs, Art Tompkins and Kevin Mensah, I would keep an eye on. Are kind of the standout talents. Tompkins is also a grad transfer. He seems to be your prototypical water bug type, quick guy who you can use on the outside and in the passing game really well. Mensah is really an every down back, especially an in between the tackles kind of guy. But I think both are really solid. The rest of the offense is pretty young and unproven, and that includes true freshman quarterback Jack Zergiadis, who is actually from Montreal, a recruiting hotbed for the UConn Huskies, and he was not, so going into the season, obviously you're coming off of a 1-11, the whole roster is young. There's really not a lot of drama in the offseason or anything like that. But one thing that people were keeping an eye on was this quarterback competition. The Huskies had a pretty good quarterback last year in David Pindell. He's gone. UConn looking for a new starter, and nobody would have picked this guy. He was a true freshman. There was the grad transfer from West Florida, Mike Beaudry, who actually started the opening game of the season. And then there was also a redshirt freshman who just, you would assume might be ahead of this guy on the pecking order. So kind of a surprise, but he's got a strong arm, and he is pretty athletic. Of course, he's going to have your typical true freshman gaffes, and he certainly did against Indiana and Illinois. But I think he's someone who just pure talent-wise, the Huskies haven't had under center, especially as a freshman. So I think that's something where if you're a Husky football fan, that's something that's pretty enticing as well.
That's pretty good in depth there. I'm curious, what has it been like for the fan base and everybody involved this season here with everything that transpired in the fall, not knowing the future of this football program beyond this year, as far as, what has it been like just to go through this? Yeah,
it's pretty interesting. I mean, I think just to give some background, but the calls to make the move that UConn did make this offseason, the decision UConn made this offseason, the calls have been there since the beginning. They've been there since 2012 when the Big East was falling apart. So that only grew and grew over the years, and as the team kind of started spiraling under the final years in Diaco and then Randy Edsall tearing it all down, it's just continued to dwindle and dwindle in terms of interest. Believe it or not, there actually is a decently vocal group that is pretty upset about the move. I think one part that's difficult to deny is just that it's tough for the coaches and kids on that team to be like, oh yeah, this is definitely like, everything normal here, nothing to see here. Like, obviously that's not the case. And there are some realities about the program that perhaps need to be visited or revisited down the road. So, but at the same time, I think largely UConn fans are optimistic. If you're not just a football fan, largely optimistic that they can make independence work, and then really excited for what the basketball side of it means. But believe it or not, there are more people than you think who were pretty upset about this. Some canceled season tickets. Some just voiced a lot of displeasure on various outlets where they can do that. But if for the group that we would call, Husky football fans, there was a decent mix, and then everyone can acknowledge that this puts the coaches and players in a tough spot for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how? Oh, I'm sorry, Eric. I just going to get this in real quick, but like, if you're Randy Edsall, or you're one of the position coaches who's flying around the Northeast, around the country, trying to recruit kids to come to UConn, how do you sell that now? Hey guys, I know we're not in the American anymore, but at least we'll be able to play UMass. I mean, I don't see, that's such a tough sell for him, isn't it?
Well, I think the recruiting point is definitely valid, where it's something that coaches can definitely recruit against them for. I think it'll all come down to what the schedule looks like. If UConn can put together a schedule that is slightly more enticing to recruits in terms of regionality, it might be something where it helps them do a little bit better in New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Jersey, which, New Jersey obviously has a lot of talent. The other three that I mentioned, not so much, but UConn has never really been, even in the heyday, UConn was never lighting the world on fire from the recruiting standpoint. It was really about just finding those right kids who are a little bit under the radar. The problem recently has been that because of the way things shook out, UConn is losing more and more of those kids to Syracuse, Rutgers, BC, even Pittsburgh. So they're good kids from Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, believe it or not, and New York. New York City's actually been growing in its talent, but there are, there's a version of events, if the schedule plays out well, to do a better job regionally recruiting. You might lose the ability to recruit North Carolina because of the ties to ECU, or Texas for sure. I think in the American, UConn tried to get into Texas a little bit with Diaco did, at least, and so has Randy Edsall. I believe we have Caleb Thomas is from Texas. So I think some of the recruiting territory changes, but potentially UConn is in a more advantageous situation within its recruiting region, which for the caliber that UConn is looking for can make a difference.
Do you think the football players and coaches feel that the school kind of stabbed them in the back? Because I kind of it felt like, regardless whether people agree with the move, did not agree with the move, I think some people would argue that not all the issues that UConn have is related to the conference. Just because you move to the Big East, I don't know. There's some issues that still may persist. I mean, the Kevin Ali situation. If he would have been successful, would we even be having this conversation? And it just felt bad. I felt bad for Randy Edsall, who's been very classy every time he's come down here to Orlando, and through the years, and I just felt bad for the players that they got kind of sold down the river. At least that's how I felt from the outside. How is it from there?
Yeah. Well, I'd say the players and the coaches are definitely two different groups, and I spoke with Jeff about this earlier, but I would be surprised if Randy Edsall, when he took the job, did not know that this was an option that was on the table. It would be pretty surprising to me if this was not something that he knew would be a possibility. And I think also potentially when we talk about how his time has gone since he got here, which I mentioned earlier, he just completely knocked it all down. It got much, much worse, from Diaco, but by design, he started a lot of young. And to me, that's indicative of the fact that he had a long leash to rebuild. And potentially part of that is because they knew that there might be some volatility in terms of conference moves. I mean, one thing that, I will say about this move by UConn is that at the very least, they took matters into their own hands and were the first mover rather than, let's say, an AAC team, a different AAC team leaving for whatever other reason, maybe getting a call up or what have you, and then now the AAC is crumbling and UConn is once again in the familiar position of looking for a life raft. So I think overall as an athletic department, that's the justification for the move, and I think the players, I totally feel for the players. I think. You're right to say the conference is not the only reason for the football or basketball team's lack of success, but I think also the players, if you the players are used to lots of change, whether it's with head coaches or stadium situations or this, that, or the travel situations. So, I think they're used to things happening to them, and if again, it's going to really depend on what the schedule looks like instead of what we have. So if you go from the American to you're playing FIU and New Mexico State and Middle Tennessee State versus some of the more regional schools that I mentioned earlier, like your Syracuse, Boston College, even other kind of mid-tier FBS looking more across the region, like your North Carolina schools. UConn just signed a series with Maryland, for example. I think if UConn's able to put a schedule together that just has a little bit more of a geographic center that aligns to the state of Connecticut or the Northeast where most of their players are from, it could be something where the players see it as a benefit over what was a very nationally dispersed AAC travel schedule.
Aman, the defense last year was, in some aspects, the worst ever, possibly, in some aspects. However, there has been some, I think, significant statistical improvement, even against some pretty decent opponents. And I know you guys have a new defensive coordinator, but really, and you mentioned some of the players already, but what has changed to where this defense is halfway respectable this year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, Randy Edsall went super youth movement in a way that I can't pretend to know every single school and what they've done, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find a two deep if you look through the the ones made public last year, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find one with more freshmen and sophomores on it, or just, overall average age. The thing about the defense being bad last year was that it was not a surprise. It's not like, people were thinking this would be your mid-2000s Randy Edsall stout defense football team. So what's changed is they've gotten some experience, and then they did add the grad transfer that I mentioned earlier in DJ Morgan. I think that's really helped solidify them at linebacker. They also got a grad transfer in the secondary, but really it's just that everyone got a year older, I think. And they had enough guys who Edsall had been putting in since day one when they were true freshmen or redshirt freshmen, and they are starting to get better. And I think that's the part where the Husky football fans find it really promising, though obviously clearly they are still very much experiencing growing pains.
Aman Kidwai from the UConn blog, part of SB Nation's network, alongside us, joining us here. All right, I want to step forward to, because we talked quite a bit about it, with UConn leaving the American, and and that happens. That's July 30th, right? Or excuse me, June 30th is their last day, and they're moving into independence. I guess we talked about this earlier, but my question for you would be, fast forward to 2025, 2030, where do you think UConn football will be? Do you think they'll still be an FBS independent, or will they move down to FCS and maybe join one of the leagues that perhaps they were in before they bumped up to FBS back in 2000, or could you see a situation where UConn could drop football entirely?
I doubt they drop football entirely. I think in 2025, I feel pretty confident predicting they'll be still FBS independent. I think they'll just have to see how it plays out and make a decision in for the 2030 part of your question. We'll just see how it plays out. It would be impossible for anybody to predict what kind of shifts happen in the NCAA's organizational structure in the mid-2020s when everyone's TV contract runs out, and perhaps there's another big land grab by some conference, or maybe some new financial players enter the picture, like the tech companies, as so many people have rumored or postulated. So really hard to predict 2030. It's again, impossible, but I think there is a non-zero chance they do end up moving down to FCS if independence doesn't work out. And I think even then, as long as the goal is to be a quality FCS program and basketball stays in the Big East, I don't think there would be too much about it. But I think it's obviously acknowledging that certain aspirations that the athletic department had before are no longer there, and that's probably what's the part that's probably tougher for UConn fans to grab a hold of. But your guess is as good as mine for 2030.
Bring back the Yankee Conference.
Sure.
Go ahead, Elo.
I mean, I'm good. I mean, he's addressed everything I think that has to be addressed. I'm just curious. Have you heard any feedback on, I mean, we know basketball and football, but what about the other sports like baseball? We kind of found it amusing that the baseball schedule came out early. They've got a great program, as you know. I mean, they're going from a top baseball conference back to the Big East. What's been the reaction on the other sports from UConn?
So, yeah, I mean, I think baseball is the only one where clearly they have lost something. The American was a great baseball conference, a lot of good teams. UConn was one of them. Great postseason performance by the baseball team, and I think it's actually been helpful for them. I can't profess to know too much about the recruiting of on the baseball team, but I think a lot of their players are from the Northeast anyway. I think UConn was even before the American, still putting guys in the majors. George Springer is a Big East UConn guy. That's the former World Series MVP. And a lot of other Huskies actually across the majors. But I think no doubt baseball took a loss in terms of quality of schedule. I think baseball has enough going for it in terms of its history, the fact that there's a new stadium being built, new practice facilities that will buoy them. And then for the rest of the athletic department, I think they're all, with all due respect to everybody involved, but I think the women's volleyball team is pretty excited to not have to make multiple trips to Texas and Oklahoma every year. So I think baseball is definitely the one that loses something, but I don't think it's something massively significant. It's not like being in the AAC opened up new recruiting territory for the baseball team. Hard data on that, but
so I mean, it's definitely a loss, I think, for both UConn baseball and for the American to lose, to go their separate ways, nonetheless. But Aman Kidwai from the UConn blog, make sure you hit up the UConn blog on Twitter and the UConnblog.com, part of the SB Nation network. When we return, we'll we'll check in with some of the other sports for UCF and see what else is going on around. Well, we got some golf news to pass along to you. Stick around. We'll be right back here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. All right, welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff Sharon, Eric Lopez, Brian Murphy with you here. Let's talk about some news in some of the other sports we have. A big week for both soccer squads, women's soccer and men's soccer, with a couple big victories. First of all, women's soccer went out to California. I don't care who you're playing out in California. It's a tough road trip, whoever you're playing out. I don't care if it's UCLA and Stanford or UC Santa Cruz and San Jose State. It's hard to go from Florida all the way out to the West Coast and get a couple of victories. And women's soccer did that. They beat Long Beach State on a goal-ahead goal by Ellie Moreno in the 90th minute. And a couple days later, they go to UC Irvine and beat them in overtime on a golden goal from Kristen Scott. So 2 dramatic wins for UCF women's soccer, and they are heating up, Eric Lopez. They've won 5 straight heading into conference play, and they're opening conference play with Memphis, who's ranked number 11 in the coaches poll. UCF not even is receiving votes in the United Soccer Coaches. And their RPI, the RPI for women's soccer came out for the first
really
this
oh,
time.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay, look at you.
UCF is 96th in the RPI right
What's the
now.
number?
96th.
Oh,
so they have a ways to climb, but they can climb
some of the other teams.
All right, so let's see. We have
that'll definitely move up. If that makes this match against Memphis even bigger on Thursday night, while you look that up, because
Memphis is the highest American team. They're at 42. SMU's at 52, and UCF's at 96. So UCF's the third highest RPI. It's not a good RPI year for. Oh, excuse me, South Florida. Excuse me, South Florida is 16th. I beg your pardon. I was wrong on that. But USF's
Jeff,
off to a good start.
I'm a little surprised by those numbers. That's why I'm a little caught off guard. They're clearly different than the polls because Memphis is ranked 11th. SMU's ranked, I believe, in the top 25. USF is actually receiving votes, as is UCF. Now, it is early, and this would help it out because Memphis, of course, won the conference tournament last year. They have another great team, Brooks Monaghan, who's been the head coach there forever. I mean, this rivalry goes back to Conference USA days when they were playing for Conference USA championships. Memphis knocked off UCF last year in the American Conference semis.
Yeah, and there's no love lost between these two schools going back to that because every UCF Memphis women's soccer game I've seen has been chippy, right?
Yep. No, that's accurate. I've talked to former players about it. Memphis is their big rival because there was always the two that were battling for the conference. And if you're UCF and you want to go through the conference, it's going to start with this matchup against Memphis. And this is a big one, and they're really good. They're dynamic offensively. They've outscored their opponents 27-3 through 9 games, averaging 3 goals a match, led by Clarissa Laresi, who has started really has been one of their top leading goal scorers in the sport. And they have a great goalie in Elizabeth Moberg. So this is a big challenge for UCF. You're right. I think they're peaking at the right time. And it is a big match because you mentioned that RPI really surprises. I mean, it's low. Go figure. You can't figure out RPIs, but this is a huge match. Even though I know it's only the first match, it's a huge match because if you look at the conference outlook, Memphis, South Florida, those going in was probably the two best teams going in. You got to go through those two teams, and I think UCF, and I'm going to throw SMU in there, want to crash that, and it's going to be fascinating to see the matchup and the styles there and how UCF defensively matches up with Memphis offensively. I can't wait to see this match. I'm actually going to try to go out there. There's going to be some Orlando Pride players out there.
Yeah, it's Orlando Pride night. Bridget Callahan is going to be there. Yeah, it's Orlando Pride night Thursday at 6 at the Track and Soccer Complex, and then they follow it up by playing Tulsa Sunday at 1. Tulsa's RPI is bad; they're 211, but you're hoping that the 42 will at least overtake that 211 somewhat. For UCF women's soccer. So 5-1-2, trying to extend that win streak as they go into conference play. Speaking of also entering conference play, men's soccer ripped off another big week, and they got a big win down in Fort Myers against Florida Gulf Coast, who's a team who's receiving votes in the top 25. And UCF goes down there and drops 4 goals on them, 2 from Cal Jennings and 2 from Gino Vivi, who one of the newcomers on the team, to get a 4-1 win. And then that was last Wednesday. And then they come back and get the victory over South Carolina on Sunday with Jennings again scoring a goal. So that's 6 straight unbeaten for UCF men's soccer as they're 5-1-1. And they move up in the United Soccer Coaches to number 12 as they start conference play against Temple on Friday at 7. So this is so now UCF men's soccer finds themselves kind of in the catbird seat, no?
They are. I mean, Cal Jennings. I mean, it's a broken record. The guy's a machine. He could score it all, but he's getting scoring from elsewhere, and they're clicking on also. They dominated that South Carolina match on Sunday. They outshot South Carolina 23-3.
Never met a shot they didn't like. That's what I keep saying about that team. Never met a shot they didn't like.
And what's going to be fascinating about this matchup is they're going to play a Temple team that only defensively allows 7 shots per match so far this year. So this is a kind of a strength versus strength. Temple's very good defensively, tries to keep the ball away, help their defense, whereas UCF likes to attack. So it's going to be a fascinating matchup from that standpoint. Temple does not want to get into a shootout. They've only averaged 0.67 goals this year so far this year. They've only allowed an average of 1 goal per match. They've given up 6 goals. They've only scored 4. So they're not a firepower offense. So if you're UCF, you jump on Temple and then make them chase you. You don't want to get into a situation where maybe Temple has confidence, has maybe the ball control, and you're in the 80th minute and it's a scoreless match and you have no rhythm. So that's going to be the thing to look for in that match.
Cal Jennings, by the way, with 7 goals on the season, tied for 6th in the nation. The leader is Kimarni Smith, who's all of Clemson, who's all by himself with 9. 4 players with 8, including Jordan Hall of UConn, and actually another guy for Clemson, Robbie Robinson, who has 8. So Clemson has 17 goals from 2 guys this year. So that'll give you an idea of what Cal is up to. But as we head into conference play, this is going to start to get really interesting. Volleyball. Tough weekend for volleyball as they hosted the Sunshine Classic. This is a tournament that's gone on for 4 years, a contract between UCF, Miami, Florida Gulf Coast, and FAU, where they would play each other, and each time they would host it once over 4 years. So this is UCF's turn to host. Started out by playing Florida Gulf Coast, who you'll remember ASUN champions last year, beat UCF in the first round with some injuries on the UCF side of the NCAA tournament. And the Eagles came in and, man, did they look good. Beat UCF in 4. Then the following day, UCF had a pair of games, or pair of matches rather. Forced Miami to 5 after falling down 2-0, but then couldn't come up with it in the 5th set. Miami got the victory, but then the Knights finished off the weekend with a victory over FAU in rather short order. Beat them up in 3. So right now, UCF volleyball is 7-5 overall as they start conference play. at home against UConn on Friday at 7, and then Temple Sunday at noon. So this is so as UCF, I think it was really important. I was there for all 3 matches. It was really important for UCF to get that last match against FAU. The Miami match was kind of a coin flip, but I think there were some issues that might have been uncovered in that FGCU match in terms of how UCF approaches the attack. But I think you have to just give credit to FGCU because they were all over the place on defense. I think UCF ran their offense actually fairly well, but FGCU defensively is so fast and so good, especially their libero, Dana Axner, who's just a sophomore. I mean, she's going to be a real problem. She might be one of the best liberos in the country, and that's not a joke either. Every opportunity UCF had, they were able to dig out. So so UCF has to look forward to conference play now with Friday and Sunday, and try and get up and ahead of their side of the league here for UCF Volleyball. And two things to pass along from golf. Men's golf won their tournament in Hartford, the Hartford Hawks Invitational. They finished in first place, minus 26 as a team. And women's golf, we might have a budding star for UCF women's golf, and Emily Marin, Eric Lopez, and Brian Murphy. Tunrata Pittin. She's from Thailand. She goes by Pat. So Pat Pittin finished first overall. She was the top medalist at the Mason Rudolph Championship in Nashville. This is a tournament that is not named after the backup quarterback, but Pittin finishes overall first place with 6 under par. Under par, she was under the line in all 3 rounds, and she became the individual. And she won the individual medalist in just her second collegiate start. And UCF is now 14th in the Golf Week college rankings in women's golf. So, Emily Marin's crew making some noise, Eric.
Pretty wild. That's pretty wild. Just building on the momentum from last year where they had the great run deep in the tournament, and looks like could be in for another banner year there. At top 25, Danny White talks about it. We're almost there, right? Men's soccer top 25, women's soccer getting votes, football's ranked, golf ranked. I mean, it's a lot to keep up with. It's a good problem to have.
It just keeps on going, doesn't it, Brian Murphy? What do you got coming up for us this week, Murph?
Well, I will be contributing once again to the Knights Roundtable, which I contributed to last week, but then people forgot about me and posted it without my responses in it. So I put my responses in late. Other than that, I will have my UCF checklist, or whatever we want to call it, against UConn.
I love that so much.
Probably be very UCF centric. Usually, I like to make that article about the other team, about the matchups on the other team that we need to watch for. But for this game, it's probably going to be very UCF centric because I'm not exactly sure what. Well, now that we've talked to Aman, I know a little more. But I don't know if there's any matchups that strike me as threatening. I'll say this just for this game, and also pour one out for Bo Taylor, who got designated for assignment tonight from the Oakland Athletics.
Yeah.
So now UCF current major leaguers is down to Drew Butera, Eric Skoglund, and is that it? I feel like there's one more that I'm forgetting. But the fact is that we're running low, and we need guys like Thad Ward and Jason Barr to really start coming up here.
Eric, what you got?
That's touching, Murph. Well, I will not be on the round table this week. I actually debated, because of my performance last week's round table being so wrong that I got crow. I actually was debating I was going to redshirt the rest of the year because I felt I would be better next year. But I had a meeting with Jeremy. We had a very sit-down meeting, and he calmed me down. So I'm just going to take this week off from the round table, and I'm going to focus on, I'm going to be at the women's soccer match Thursday. Memphis UCF, huge match Thursday night. I might be trying to go out Friday night, men's soccer and Temple. I know volleyball going at the same time. I'm going to see if certain things work. Jeremy will be with Murph on Saturday at the Spectrum Stadium for UCF and UConn, the final civil conflict. So they'll have that cover. I will be entertained by Jeff's telestrator right after the game on the night shift post game. And then Sunday, I'm going to volleyball, Jeffrey. Noon, right? Noon,
yep.
First serve.
Noon start.
And then maybe even take a peek at women's soccer, which is at 1 o'clock. It's a very busy week, so I'm going to focus on the other sports while I'll let Brian and Jeremy focus on football there at the site. And then on the site itself, you can check out my article on the TV numbers for the Pittsburgh game and what it means as they moving forward. Very unique because it was regional coverage, but it did very good numbers on that. And then as well as our 3-night stars of the week, which is very soccer heavy because we're a soccer school as well. So a lot of fun there, but I'm not going to red shirt for the year and quit on you guys. Don't just because we lost. I'm not gonna
I forgot to mention a little earlier 2 guys that are Central Florida guys who are coming back to UCF with UConn. You remember he talked about Mike Beaudry, Aman did, the backup quarterback for UConn, grad student who came over from UWF. Well, he actually went to Haggerty High School. So Beaudry, I wonder if they'll put him in there since he went to high school right up the road from campus. That would be nice if they got the opportunity to give him that. And then also Malik Dixon, freshman defensive back for UConn, who is a graduate of Wekiva High School. So 2 Central Florida guys who we'll see this Saturday with UConn, which I'll be following that one from afar. But make sure you join me and Jeremy and hopefully Eric and a few more people on night shift, which we'll do immediately after the game because it's a late game. We're not going to wait a few hours.
In honor of Murph, I drank coffee this week for the first time in a few years, and I'll have some coffee for that night shift.
You don't have to.
You, Murph.
And then I'll be at volleyball these 2 for their 2 matches as well, Friday and Sunday to start the conference play. So,
and by the way, before anybody asks, no, Murph's not going to give out a game ball fedora on a loss. Sorry, all right? I know
no game ball.
And by the way, before anybody complains, I forgot to mention Dylan Moore. That's the guy I forgot.
There you go. I knew there were. I did think there was one more.
Only the guy you interviewed in person a few weeks ago.
The guy I talked to in person last
Dylan,
month.
I hope you're not listening. If you are, Murph is really sorry. He really is.
By the way, I just checked because now I'm obsessed. Dylan has an OPS of 800 in his last 50 at-bats. Look at this.
He's killing it.
So since you talked to him, he's turned his game around?
He's killing it.
He's not doing too bad.
So as we wrap up here on the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast, don't forget to hit us up at blackandgoldbanneret.com, UCF_Banneret on Twitter, and Facebook.com/Black and Gold Banneret. Good luck with that 43.5 number this week, all you guys out there. For Eric Lopez and Brian Murphy, I'm Jeff Sharon saying thank you so much for listening. We'll see you on night shift after UCF and UConn on Saturday night. Enjoy the weekend.